And I would like to ask Supervisor Zumas if he would lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We have before us approval of the minutes of the meeting of August 7th, 2019. We're getting really caught up on minutes. Congratulations, Shelley. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of August 7th?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the minutes of August the 7th, 2019 as prepared and circulated.
So moved. Is there a second?
Aye.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Before we proceed to public comment, I would like to announce the Board of Supervisors met in executive session prior to this meeting to receive information from the Township Manager and from the Director of Parks and Recreation. We will also be meeting following this meeting to discuss personnel issues. With that, does anybody have a comment on an item not on the agenda this evening? Any comments on an item not on the agenda? Okay. Mr. Murphy had his big meeting last week, right? And saw all sorts of good things on Facebook about it, so congratulations again. With that, we will now go to presentation of action on Ordinance 1907. This is approving certain actions and plans relative to the financing of our swap agreement. Mr. Smida, we are very well briefed on this issue. Is there additional information?
Now I'm unauthorized.
Good evening. I thought I'd just briefly summarize what this is. State law requires that if you enter into an interest rate management agreement with a counterparty, such as we have with RBC, and any amendment thereof must be approved by an ordinance. It also requires that your interest rate management plan, which is the plan that Susquehanna Advisors has put together and we have reviewed, that also has to be approved in the form of an ordinance. The ordinance has to be advertised both before enactment and after enactment. An advertisement will appear in Thursday's Patriot News, and then we will file, not for approval, but only for the record with the Department of Community and Economic Development, the copy of your ordinance as well as the plan, and which is, again, the document that Susquehanna has put together, a fairness opinion, our opinion, and the interest rate management, amended interest rate management plan, which takes the form of a confirmation. Mm-hmm. So in summary, you're taking action required by state law to approve the amendment of the interest rate management agreement and plan.
So the ordinance that we have before us, this is an explanation of it. We haven't advertised it at this point, Mr. Stein?
No, I have advertised it.
You have advertised
I have
it?
And it will be again advertised on Thursday.
Okay. Would it then be in a position for action at next week's meeting, or do we have to, not enough time elapsed and we have to wait until?
No, you have the other authorization right now to do it. Local Government Unit Debt Act trumps any other advertising requirements in the second-class township code.
Okay. So we can move on this next week?
Preferably you do it tonight, because
tonight?
we're amending the plan on Thursday.
Oh, okay, so we do need to do it.
You do need to do it tonight.
This being an ordinance, Mr. Stein, you must conduct a hearing?
No, we don't have
No? Oh, that's unusual, too.
Again, under the Local Government Unit Debt Act, both the procedure and the advertising requirements trump anything in any township, borough, or school district code.
Okay. Okay, well then we have before us ordinance 2019-07. Do any board members have any additional questions of Mr. Smida? Any public question or comment of Mr. Smida? Okay, seeing none, you've explained it well.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Ordinance 2019-07, approving the certain actions and plans relative to the finance swapping as presented and recommended by Mr. Smida.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
There we go. Now, we as I recall, October 10th was about the date for the closing on the bond issue. That's still? It is the date.
Pardon me, it is the date that you're closing. So on that day, funds will be wired to the owners of the Build America bonds to retire them. Funds will be wired to RBC to pay a portion of the, to amend the swap agreement to bring it down to make it economic. It sets the rate at the swap at 2.253%. And it also funds the various capital improvement projects, including the Friendship Center, the bridge, stormwater management, radio police. I think I'm missing one more.
Fire trucks.
Fire trucks, right, yeah. All that occurs on Thursday.
Very good. All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Great job on that. Okay, now we are going to have a presentation on countywide stormwater management efforts.
I don't know why it was on.
Oh, Mr. Deck from the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission. Good evening.
White shirt, red tie, presentation.
Good night, Tom.
Appreciate the opportunity to come, kind of bring you up to date on what we've been doing at the county level, stormwater wise.
There we go. Is that better?
Yeah.
As you may or may not know, if Fred Lighty could probably tell you, since I've been director of Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, we can't typically have a county planning commission or a tri-county commission meeting where the issues of stormwater management and the challenges for municipalities don't come up in some way, shape, or form, especially as more and more municipalities as yourselves have gone the route of levying fees to account for the cost. And the question came up, basically, is there a role at the county level or sub-county level for some sort of cooperative approach that might make some of these costs more palatable, less expensive, instead of doing, maybe at the county level up to like 100 pollution prevention projects. Could we do, for instance, some smaller number of maybe larger scale projects, get the same permit benefits, make it more efficient, cut costs? So the route we took was here earlier this year. We sent out a survey to all of the municipalities in Dauphin County, asked them a series of questions on the importance of stormwater and other water resource issues, and whether or not there was any interest in a county role to help them move forward. We got about 3/4 of the municipalities responded to the survey, so we were quite happy with that. And the vast majority of them expressed a sincere interest to at least have a conversation to see if some regional role made sense. So we presented that information here, I think it was at the very end of September, to the county commissioners, said, this is what we heard from the municipalities, they're interested in our help. We even presented them with some information, especially along the lines of these pollution prevention projects that you find yourselves doing, that in some areas where this has happened and been done at a regional scale, they've been able to find savings of up to half. If you took all of the individual municipal projects, added together the costs for them, and then reworked those projects to make them more efficient, that kind of, that you could potentially see a savings of up to half. So obviously that's substantial. So what the commissioners asked us to do was to initiate a feasibility study to start working with all of the municipalities, and this is MS4 municipalities like yourselves and the non-MS4s, which are basically the northern half of Dauphin County, to see if there are ways that we can work with municipalities on a watershed level, see if we can get something that works to the mutual benefit of at least some number of the municipalities. So we may not, I would be kind of surprised if we actually ended up with all 40 municipalities agreeing to take a specific route, because everybody has different conditions and that kind of thing. But we're going to initiate this effort. We actually are kicking it off this week. HRG is doing the feasibility analysis with us. We're also working with the Conservation District so we can address the needs of the whole range of municipalities. So we'll be doing a lot of outreach over the next 6 months. The target is to have this thing pulled together and wrapped up here early part of next year. So that at that point, we may be coming back to you if we come up with a scenario that seems to get the support of a number of municipalities. We may be asking for something like an MOU or something to work together with us moving forward. At this point, I have no way of projecting what exactly that, preferred route would be. Some counties are going the authority route, some are going kind of a cooperative agreement where they help seek grant funding and those kind of things. If any of you attended our annual luncheon, we actually had presentations from York and Lancaster counties who are taking two different directions in this very same issue. My guess is we'll end up with some sort of hybrid, given the variety of municipalities and conditions we have in Dauphin County. I have had some conversations with other municipalities like yourselves that have fees that have already started down that path. The question sometimes is asked, well, we already have a fee. How does this affect us? We won't know until we come up with a scenario approach. And again, you're not going to be forced to participate in anything. This is just an offer to try to see if we can't come up with a regional approach that's a little bit more efficient and effective moving forward. So you'll be hearing a lot about this in the upcoming months. But when I was making everybody aware, I reached out and said, hey, if any of the governing bodies are interested in a kind of a overview before we get underway, let me know. Heard from Brad, asked me to come talk to you this evening, see if you have any questions about our direction moving forward.
Very interesting.
Just a quick question. Can you think of an example where municipalities joining forces with the county could be a benefit or a cost-saving measure of sort?
Yeah, the most recent example that I'm at least somewhat familiar with is Wyoming Valley. And they had all of their municipalities, I think, at the county level up there agree. And that's where the feasibility work that was done when they looked at the cost, that's where they saw a 50% cost reduction. Now there's 50% cost reduction specifically in the area of these pollution prevention projects. There's more to the MS4 requirements than this sediment reduction. Much of it is also maintaining pipes, and your hard infrastructure. And that's probably a component of MS4 that's most appropriate at the local municipal level. I think where we can really offer you benefit is on these storm basin retrofits and stream bank revitalization, those types of things. Where I've heard from other municipalities, Derry, I think, was the first township that went the fee route. When I talked to them, for instance, they said, we've already invested in some stream bank projects only to have them blown out by stormwater coming down from further up in the watershed. It would most likely make more sense to start in the upper end of the watershed and work your way down, which is something that's only feasible beyond the municipal level. So it's those kind of things that we want to have these conversations about with the municipalities, with DEP as well, and that kind of thing, to see if we can't come to an agreement, at least at the watershed, if not at the county level.
So what option is the one that allows us to eliminate our fee? That would be the one I'd really.
Is that what you're?
That'd be the one. I think that
Full
was
support of that, are you?
option D, maybe.
Good luck with that.
So this is not something that we necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, you mentioned Wyoming Valley.
Yeah, Wyoming Valley.
Wyoming Valley. Do we get direction from the state, from the federal government, particularly, they're both involved in the regulations and standards that we're doing all this for?
Yeah.
Are we kind of on our own here? There must be some templates or some.
No, there've been a few of these feasibility studies that have been done. In fact, HRG has experienced doing this part of why we went that direction with them. There is, I would say, as I understand it, in some real preliminary conversations with DEP, as with many things, there's a preference to work with more than one municipality at once, because there's 2,600 of them in
Right.
this state of Pennsylvania. So we will be working with them and using past experience to customize a little bit something that's specific, that works for Dauphin County. But we will be taking advantage to the efforts like this that have been done in the
And
past.
ultimately, this is to get our national stormwater permit,
Yeah.
the NP.
NPDES.
So
Right.
I would imagine that they would want to help us in any way possible achieving the standards that they want to meet the permit. And if that means working regionally, it may mean pushing back deadlines. We've got to reduce our runoff into our creeks by X%.
Right.
I would imagine if they see us in a coordinated regional approach, that they would give us a break on this or that, adjust things accordingly to reach ultimately what they want.
Yeah, it could be. You're very much correct. Municipalities that hold MS4 permits like you do have had to have these pollution prevention plans already in place. Here coming up in the next year or so, Dauphin County is going to have what they call a watershed improvement plan. So kind of the overview of it. So that's another thing, that doing this now helps us develop that plan before we have to. One of the tricky points in doing this is the permits are all issued today at the municipal level. So you have a sediment reduction goal, as do all your neighboring municipalities. When you go regional, those goals have to be transferred to the watershed level, right? And then if we do something in Lower Paxton that has a benefit to Susquehanna Township, DEP has to know to give that permit credit to both municipalities. So it's working out the logistics of how that happens and who gets credit for what. That's kind of at the heart of this effort.
That's why I hope it becomes a coordinated effort, because the goal is the same and the waters are the same, and they run through various municipalities and states. And, I hope it's just not each county on their own, as it is now, each municipality on its own.
Yeah.
But this is a great first step. I appreciate it.
Well, no, we are looking forward. I'm looking forward to seeing how this
Probably not a
works
first
itself
step
out.
for you either. I'm saying,
No.
by the time it got to us, it's a great development.
I have a que-
Especially the boroughs in Dauphin County. You have boroughs that have the same burden of identifying projects, but no room. Plus they're classically downstream. Steelton Borough has its share of stormwater problems. The water comes from Swatera, into a largely impervious municipality. You could have much more effect on Steelton Borough by doing things in Swatera, obviously. So it's those kind of incidents are just all over the place. So watershed approach makes sense if you can work out the logistics permit-wise, funding-wise, who pays what, and that kind of thing. So that's the effort we're going through.
Based on what you've just said and what you've presented that we're reading here, is the state then championing this Wyoming Valley as a model for which to follow? And if so, are there others that they're championing so that there are some footprints? And then follow up to that is, what method, did they establish an authority, or what process did they follow? I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, Wyoming Valley established an authority.
They are an authority.
They're an authority, right? So, and that was supported by DEP. They participated in that
Right.
process. They would tell you, if you're going to go the authority route, that was a reasonable route to go to get to that point. Lancaster County has decided, at least to date, not to do the authority route, but to have a consortium of municipalities. That there's a kind of a nonprofit group there that helps coordinate the effort of municipalities. So they took what I would call a more passive route to addressing this same issue. York County right now is going through the process. They've had a municipal consortium for a number of years. They're going through the process now of determining whether that's most effectively over the long term would be appropriate as an authority, or whether they can take some variation of that moving forward. So they're, I think, leaning maybe an authority direction, but haven't established one yet. So there's, like I said, there's a couple of different ways that different county or large areas have decided to go. That's why I say I'm not sure where we're going to end up with this process. We're open to whichever approach seems to work for the majority of the municipalities. And we could have different approaches in different parts of the county.
That's why I was asking, is this a model that the state is championing, saying to other municipalities, look at this one, this is the footprint to follow if you want to expedite this as quickly as possible and get through the typical state bureaucracy of red tape and forms and applications, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. Yeah.
So it is.
Yeah. Oh, and
Okay.
this will definitely be, there are a few examples of taking a regional approach. There aren't a lot of them yet. So our anticipation of this is that the effort that we're going to undertake will then be a pilot.
So the state is marketing this in this fashion because because that's the way they want it and that's the way they're going to help fund.
It's of benefit to them, as
Sure.
I indicated. So.
Any other questions?
I appreciate this in the time I've been on this board, and this has been the number one issue. And I can't recall one moment in which we talked about how the actions of other municipalities should help us decide which projects to undertake, and how the actions of other municipalities will impact the projects that we're going to undertake and finance. I don't remember 1 minute, and I wasn't curious at all because I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
So I'm very much looking forward to a regional approach.
Yeah, we'll keep you, probably as we have working meetings, Brad would most likely be engaged in that, I would think, but we can certainly, if any point in time you hear of something as it relates to our effort ongoing and you want me to come back and give you an update, you just need to shout.
I think that would be important because obviously you're looking at what's going on across the Commonwealth. You're seeing what the trends are, where the strengths, where the weaknesses are. So we certainly ought to benefit from your knowledge and expertise.
We're going to do our best.
Well, thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks.
your taking an evening to come and fill us in.
Sure. No,
Thank
not
you.
a problem.
Thank you, Steve. It's always good seeing you.
Okay, now we need to have a discussion on a recommendation by the Parks and Recreation Board to rename Thomas B. George Park. And we have Terry Boaknight, come to the podium at.
You get better TV time at the podium.
My best.
Good evening, Terry.
Good evening once again. I've come, as you said, because the Parks and Rec Board has made that recommendation regarding the name change for George Park to add the word Memorial Park. But additionally, Brad had asked me to come and perhaps have a little bit of a general discussion on the park signs that we have out there. So I believe you've been supplied with some pictures.
Yes.
Okay. And the pictures are primarily from those community parks, the larger parks, as opposed to the neighborhood parks. The neighborhood parks tend to have that park rules sign that says, like, welcome to Lamplight Park, or welcome to Forest Hills Park. These rules kind of welcome to signs. But the signs that are at Lingle, Coons, Cole, Brightville are kind of similar in their style. And I would say the Brightville went in the 70s, and maybe perhaps Coons, Cole probably went in the 80s. I'm pretty sure Lingle went in the 90s, early 90s, mid 90s. But then if you get down to the last one, there's the George Park sign. That was much more recent. This is the sign that sits out by Nye Road. and it is a challenge to read it. I think everybody's in agreement to that. That's a busy road.
Yes.
You know, you come around a turn, oh, it's the park entrance. And that sign sits back. It can't sit out too far because it would obstruct vision for pulling out of the park. So the term George Park is how we commonly know it, but the memorial addition to the name has to do with the fact that the park rules structure says you don't put memorial or put a park in memory of someone unless they've been deceased at least 1 year. So that was, I think, part of their initiation of that request or that recommendation.
Terry, has the family been notified on the change?
No, they have not.
We don't have to, right?
We don't have
You
to. I was
don't
just
have
wondering.
to.
No,
I
we
was just
don't.
And it's
wondering
not,
if,
you know, this is just a recommendation. It's
Right,
up to
yeah.
you if you would choose to do that. I mean, I see that Cole Park says Richard Cole Memorial Park.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, I think it's Pete Coons, who that park was named after.
And Terry, that's exactly what I was going to say, because if we're doing memorial for Tom George, we also have Oscar Lingle, and we call it Lingle Park. We don't call it Oscar L. Lingle Memorial Park. I think my thinking is if we're going to do for one, we need to be consistent with all of them.
definitely.
And I don't know if.
I don't mean to throw a monkey wrench in,
And
but
I-
it's just it has raised that issue as soon as I see the pictures.
Not knowing the history of.
Don't even have to
had
change
it's been
them.
done on any other parks. Like, for example, is Brightville Park, yes, the sign says Brightville Park, could it possibly have been changed to Brightville Memorial Park somewhere along the line? Or did Cole Park start off as Cole Memorial? Did it change? I don't have that history.
That I don't remember.
I think it'd be preferable, and I think a lot of the signs need to be modernized anyway. It's been a while, so this is a good time to talk about it. I can't imagine anybody seeing the name of the person and the park and not knowing it's memorial. As a writer and an editor, I really like less is more. I really hate using extra words, and especially with a sign where you want the words to be, the more words you add, the smaller, in theory, they're going to get. Are there a lot of parks generally of people who are alive?
Well, looking at two examples, you have Moody Community Park and Mary Stevens Park. I don't know if they're alive or dead.
Usually they're not, or they're retired from public service, but I think usually we kind of assume they passed on and it's-
George Park was not, that was not the case.
That's right.
Thomas
Tom
George
was
he
alive and
honored
well.
while he
That's-
was
It was
alive
an
when
honor.
it
That's okay.
came
Well,
Yeah.
that's a good point, but
Yeah.
I can't. If the person's name is on the park, it is a memorial to them. Whether they're, it is in honor of them. So I don't see whether why we put the name there or the word memorial, other than to say they died, and I don't see why that's a pleasant thing to be pointing out on a sign.
Right. Well, as it
but,
pertains, I don't want to interrupt, as it
No.
pertains to the sign, again, like the Brightville Park, that's not really, I'm not sure, is that the full name of the park? But when you're approaching a park, I agree with you, you want the limited words.
Right.
You know, you're in your car, you're in traffic, but I think perhaps within the park, something that has more.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no, once you're out of your car there, there should be a story, there should be everything. I'm fully on board with that.
Yeah, like the existing sign to George Park has all that small lettering, which nobody reads because you can't. A matter of fact, even the name George Park,
It's a
if you
challenge
tried to
to
read it, you'd crash your car.
Yeah.
So
That would be a good sign inside the park.
that would be a good sign, yes. Perhaps we could move that inside the park. But, we ought to have a very simple sign. And I would agree with Chris that less lettering is better on a sign. We need a new sign to this park. There's no doubt about that. Like I'm looking at this one here that says Sky Hill Park. I'm thinking, boy, that's big. People would see it.
Right.
Because sometimes people say to me, well, where is this George Park? They drive by it several times a week, don't even realize it's there. So something like the Sky Hill Park sign,
That's a real good one.
that's a good one. Now the one next to it, the Bay Oaks, that's way
That's
too
a
much
little
stuff.
busy, yeah.
And then recall also back to when we had the Soccer Association folks in here when we were doing the grant request, that they had mentioned having a sign at the entrance to George Park delineating that that was where soccer was occurring.
Something like that, right?
So, if there could be sort of like a sub sign indicating something that would delineate the park, although there's other than soccer there, isn't there?
Yeah, I don't know, as someone, our kids have been playing there for years and years. I don't know that that's necessary. I mean, if you tell the parents it's at George Park, if you can get them at George Park, they're fine.
They're
They
fine.
don't need to
Right.
see, they're not going to see George Park and say, well, I don't see the Casa sign. No.
Yeah.
We'll go to the other George Park.
Well, I really like that Sky Hill Park. Now, I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly that, but the lettering is large. You can easily read it. You'd have the township logo at the top.
But I-
Little rustic.
I think we have two distinct different issues.
We do.
One is changing the name of the park.
Yes.
And the other one is what kind of a sign do we want
Sure.
to show?
Design and.
And I think,
Well, let's let them work on design because by committee, we're not going to.
Right.
But so, okay, but you are correct, Norm. So I guess question number one is, do we want to entertain changing the name of the park?
well, Terry, would you care to share the philosophy as to how this came up in the first place and why?
That was my question, yeah.
I don't have a great answer for that. I think it was to recognize Tom once again, Tom George once again, and to, perhaps the committee person who suggested it, was acknowledging the fact that they've waited more than a year since he passed.
They're just sticking to the policy.
Yeah.
Well, but how did Brightbill Park become Brightbill Park? Was that named after Mr. Brightbill? Is he alive? Is he dead? Did he comply with the 1 year?
And that's exactly the point that I was making with Oscar Lingle.
Right.
Oscar
same idea.
Lingle has passed, but the park still says, the picture that you had showed us is
NR.
Oscar Lingle. If we're going to go to the memorial, then we need to be consistent with all of them, as opposed to not using the word memorial and keeping the parks. And
the
I
names.
would support these, and I'm going to tie them together, the sign where it's the Sky Hill Park sign, that if you keep the name simple, like George Park, Lingle Park,
Right.
Brightbill Park. There's a consistency of using the name, and we don't have to use memorial, but is the recognition, it is the simplicity on the sign that identifies the park for someone who's trying to locate Brightbill.
That's a great idea, because I think, having their name in the community parlance where it's just a known, everybody's saying George Park, what's a greater way to literally remember someone and keep their name alive than having it be just a landmark?
And the last part of that I was going to add, which will cost money, that if we're going to change one sign for consistency and keep the names without memorial, that we change all the signs so all the signs of Lower Paxton Township parks look exactly alike except for the name change.
Let's.
I know that's an expense.
Yeah, let's.
I'd like to see the
I think maybe what might be good here is part two of
As
the
ne- as
discussion.
needed.
Yeah, as they need to be replaced.
Then we change and make it the same so that they're all.
But the Parks and Rec Department and the board should come up with one standardized sign design that we would initiate at George Park. And then,
That
as you
becomes
said,
the standard.
We will now, and maybe each year, replace one or two, so it's not a huge budget item.
Yeah.
And then replicate that same design through all parks that would brand our parks.
Right.
That's
the
a
first
great
one that
idea.
becomes the standard, and we do
Yeah.
just like I used to replace buses in the school district. You replaced so many every year.
Yeah.
So we'd replace the sign every year, but we have the standard. It replaces. We use the last name to keep the sign simple.
And if we develop a good process and we enjoy it, we can talk about having a welcome to Lower Paxton Township sign get ourselves a decent one of those signs.
Well-
But that is not a priority.
Ka-ching.
We got a lot on our
We
plate.
tried that a
Well,
couple
now,
years ago.
interesting you would
That was
bring
tied in with a whole other
I
thing.
know.
the welcome to Lower Paxton signs. I've actually tried having some conversations with members of various service clubs about the possibility of having all the service clubs go together to do a project, to do a welcome sign that would then have the logos of the Rotary Kiwanis Lions,
Right.
and have it done through a community effort rather than through tax dollars.
Right.
I just have a question about Cole. So if we do replace the sign in the future, are you just going to call it Cole Park instead of Richard Cole Memorial?
That would be consistent.
Yeah,
We should have a consistent policy.
okay.
With
okay.
inside the park, then you have
Right.
his
Then you
whole
can
name.
Okay.
identify who
I
it
just
is,
wanted to make
why.
sure that you were going to change that one also.
Yeah, you would have a sub sign inside the park that would have all the other verbiage that was on the exterior sign that confuses, that people can't read.
Yeah.
So am I hearing a consensus that we do not want to change the name of the park, at least on the entrance sign? Is that where we're headed?
On the entrance sign.
On
And
the
we'd like to make
entrance,
this
yeah.
a consistent
In all the big parks, yeah,
in all the parks.
yeah.
And y'all would come up with a nice new design that would then brand each of the parks, and then we can begin that replacement process.
And we'd like to see a cost estimate.
Yes, very much.
I hope that's okay with the Parks Committee. I don't want to step on their idea.
Well, I do have another comment or two, Brad, if you could put the LPT signs up again. So
What do you want?
the park entrance, yeah. I think that the Parks and Rec Board, in my quick survey of them, they like the idea of sticking to this kind of uniform, like the Brightville Park sign. But if you would notice on the Coons sign there and the Brightville above it, and then if you come down to the George Park sign, the wording that is here is similar to the little white signs on the other two. Sometimes when you get grant money from DCNR to support your work in the park, part of their grant requirement is that you acknowledge that funding on your sign, and they come and look for that. So that's what the white letters are. That's acknowledging the funding at the bottom. You wouldn't know because you can't see it from
Right.
the
Right.
car, you know? But if you go to the other George, the rules sign, but those little white sign in here. At
Right.
the bottom of the George sign is more of that.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
to-
that's fine.
Or historically, if there were two different funding projects that each required that verbiage, but it can be added. I think that's the
Right.
point I want to try and make. It was added up above at the Brightville and the Coons sign in that little white square. That,
So Terry, they tell you where it needs to be placed? They can't put it inside the park? It has to be on the
no,
entrance?
That I would have to research.
Yeah, see,
Right.
if we can put it inside, that'd be
Rather
great.
put it inside.
If it
Yeah.
was
People would
alongside,
take the
or,
time to read it.
Yeah.
I mean, when you
Or
look at
just
the
that
Brightville
little-
sign or the Coons sign, it's not really that distracting.
It's just a little thing.
and if
But it
necessary,
does no good there. Nobody's gonna,
But it satisfies that.
Satisfies the
It
grant
satisfies
requirement.
If the
grant
George Park
requirement.
lettering satisfies them, then we'll just do that for all of them, because, I mean, that's, you know.
But if the
we can
Brightville
keep,
Park.
we
if
can
that's
keep
out-
our signs exactly as we said, that once we, if, I'm using the Sky Hill Park model, if we were to use that, and then any given time that we receive the money and are required to put the statement, put a smaller one with the hooks in the bottom that just hangs underneath. It meets the requirements, it gets the money, and does not take away the consistency and uniformity of our sign for our parks.
or if possible, on an interior sign rather than on the
Yeah.
entrance sign, if we can
Right.
We
comply
can do
with the grant.
interior, otherwise, whatever's most aesthetically pleasing that meets,
And my comment was based on the fact if it was required by the grant that was
is
coming to
required on
us.
the outside.
Speaking of aesthetically pleasing, I don't think any of those signs are.
Any of ours? I don't either.
I think they're
Blah.
They're
They were great for their
blah.
time. They were great.
They're
they were great for their time.
you know, it's like an HGTV show before a renovation.
They're mundane.
You know, it's you know, old style just doesn't.
I'm more happy that people were worried about developing a good park. So I don't want to diss the signs too much.
Well, they
did
were
the
probably,
job.
they were probably state-of-the-art when they were put in.
Yeah.
You know, but here we are,
To be uniform, they were designed, the future ones, to be uniform with.
yeah.
Well, and we have
Wood
to,
coloring is very nice. I really like that. You can also get too gaudy, too much color.
I don't want neon, but
Yeah.
something a little,
The Sky Hill Park is conservative and classic in design and in color.
I really do like that sign.
Maybe we could
That's
go to the
very-
art classes at the schools and ask them.
You could maybe get some advice
create
from an old
a
art teacher.
contest, An art contest
Well,
to
this-
develop the artwork for the park.
Like I said, you can maybe get some advice from an old art teacher from
Well, and
Central
remember-
For a
Dauphin.
really old art teacher. as the case-
Or a really old art teacher.
well, and remember, we have to follow our sign ordinance also.
The what?
We have to follow our own sign ordinance.
Well,
Yeah.
that would be a good idea, Robin.
Maybe it would be necessary to amend our sign ordinance.
Well, yeah.
Sky looks great, but it's awfully big, so we
Well,
have
we
to.
can, we
you
can
know,
always,
go by the
yeah, you're
sign
right. We can
ordinance.
always, we passed, some board passed it, we can amend it.
Absolutely.
Although it'd be best to stick to the one we have.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think that first one is really impactful, and it does take in with the wood. It keeps that little element, and it looks
Easy to read.
easy. It looks parkish.
Nice
if
font.
there's such a word.
Colors are very earthy tone.
Now
And you
Probably
want
the
to
dollar sign too.
it's classic.
You want to then there'll be
Classic.
materials expense and life. What's the life term of it? Some materials may age quicker, so there may be some other things that we're going to have to consider.
Some should die after a period of time, like
But
the current one.
additionally, if you want to recognize the park namee inside the park, you're potentially talking a second sign for
Right.
each park. And then the rules signs that are in the parks were purchased around 2002.
Yeah.
So they're starting to fade and age
Okay.
as well. So
Well, and we know
it's a
pretty
lot of
much
sign attention needed.
we can
so.
take the current George Park sign, which is nice, and put it on the inside. So I think that'll. I don't want to throw that out. I think
Well, on the other hand, you may want to develop not only a standardized design for the entrance sign, but a standardized design for all the interior signs as well, that as we go park by park over the years, at the end of the process, they're all the same.
Yes.
I wouldn't waste it necessarily, especially if they let us put the state wording on the inside. I say, boom, put that sign right inside. And it's a big park. We
I'll
still
also
want
try
to do
and
another
check
sign.
if the current wording inside is sufficient, or if these were two different.
And we won't know the answers till someone does the research to find out where the sign has to be placed.
Okay, so for Terry's point of view, we're not in agreement with renaming the park. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think they should all be the same.
They should,
I think all should be the same.
That's my opinion.
not using the word memorial in any
Right.
of them.
No.
Is that what we mean by that?
Correct.
not
And the other thing too is we've started talking, again, we call that Lingle Park, not Oscar Lingle. Tom B. George, we call it the George Park, so we could be consistent with using that last name.
So no parks would use the word memorial.
Correct.
And all parks would be last name of the honoree only.
Right, because let's make sure we're consistent, because we've got Bright Bill,
Yeah, Bright Bill.
Cole,
The only, well, Cole is
Coons,
no.
Yeah,
George,
Coles would have to be
Lingle.
changed.
So yes, that would be consistent.
Well, and we're going to, over time, depending on cost, we're going
Right.
to replace all the signs so they will become consistent if they aren't.
Right, with the standard we've established.
I think it's really important that whatever we do everywhere, so that when somebody goes into a township park, that's a sign, that's a township park.
Right, and that's what I look for.
Please let the committee know that we appreciate them bringing that to our attention, because they were trying to follow the policy as far as memorial goes, and we appreciate it, and it's going to spur a whole new development, I think.
Just the consistency at all the parks.
Okay?
The-
Anything
the-
else?
The little parks, Terry, like Lamplight Village, are any of those named after anybody?
I would say they tend to be more.
Community.
I know they're all
of the-
community,
I mean,
right?
we lease Mateer Fields. I'm thinking that's named
Right.
after a
The,
person.
the only one Terry, it's within Coons, we have Steve Foltz
The
baseball
communi- the-
field.
It's not really the field, I think it's pertaining to the, as they call it, the community building, but it's the concession stand.
Okay, yeah, the actual name is on the building.
Correct.
So it's
Yeah.
a concession stand,
It's
so
like
that's
Ranger
different than the
Field.
But I
park.
think on the way
Ranger
they place
Field,
it on the building, they call it like
which is
community
in George Park, I guess.
or something like
I
that.
guess, yeah. So those pretty much can probably remain the same.
Yeah, so most of them are just community, like Lamplight
Sites, Kings
Village.
Crossing,
Right,
Lamplight,
Kings Crossing,
Centennial,
right, because of the
Stills.
community. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss any of the little ones, you know, of the little parks.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're talking, what, an additional 13?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you said 5 to 6 before the big ones, and then 13, so.
13, including the least fields.
But it wouldn't matter if we
extra.
have, once we have the standard, doesn't matter the size of the park.
No,
But at least we have the
Right.
consistency
about were
of
there
the
any other
policy and the standardization
Right,
of the
that's what
policy.
I was just
We would
looking at.
do
I don't
new
think there
signage
are,
on the
but
big
just to
ones
be
first
safe.
and then work our
yeah.
way into the,
Sure.
I'll double check my list in my case here, but yeah, I don't think so.
okay?
If you could forward a list to Brad of all the names of the parks,
Mm-hmm.
because I know they just have all these little community ones. If you could just stick it in our packet, I think it would be interesting to look at them.
And real quick, Terry, I remember speaking at one point with Leanne Urban about kind of producing an informational packet on all of our parks, maybe using that for our e-newsletters that we're doing, just letting people know where their nearest park is and all the things that go on in that. Did that ever happen, or did you ever hear about, did you hear about any of that?
Not from Leanne, no. I mean,
Okay.
we have, as I spoke about earlier, there is a good for PA, Get Outdoors PA kind of resources that you can go on and go find a park near me. And it, you know, it can jump on just your own computer, like allow my location, and it can pop up Brightville Park. And it can list some of the amenities there. We could really expand that, and it's a resource that's out there for us to use.
Or even just one web page with, you know, here's our major parks, you know, location, and then for some of the big ones anyway, not producing any new information. I'm thinking just information we already have, and we just got done talking about your workload, so I'm not looking for to increase that. But I just know back when I was a new resident, and you really, and it's such a big township, you really have no idea where the nearest park is, what they have there,
Yeah.
what's going on. So just something for the future.
The township website on the park page does list every park and the amenities in it. It may not.
So it's already there.
Have like a GPS look to go,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm here, what's close? But it does list the names, the amenities, and gives you an address.
Yeah.
So-
Okay, that's good.
I wonder in the spring newsletter if we ought to do a featured article on the parks. Talk about the parks, because people probably don't realize that we have like 18 parks in Lower Paxton Township. And that would be nice, like for the spring when, you know, the weather's getting nice. So it might be something we might want to think about, Brad. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks,
welcome.
Thank you,
Terry.
Terry, very much.
We now need to move on. We have requests for a nomination of a representative to serve on the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission. It's Tri-County Regional Planning Commission night. Mr. Godshall.
Yes, sir. Members of the board, if I may, and maybe the director could speak a little more to this, but just by way of brief introduction, we got this letter from the commission indicating that the commission will have an opening for the regional representative, and that the commission is seeking nominations to that opening position, which currently is represented by Mr. Frank Klebnikow.
I was wondering where you were going to go with that. How is it pronounced again? Klempnikow. Okay, thank you.
Frank actually used to work here in the planning department.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for a number of years. Yeah.
Now we moved to Susquehanna.
What's that?
I said he lives in Susquehanna.
Yeah.
Well, we all backslide a little bit. That's-
So then there's not an opening, or he wants to be,
He wants to
continue
continue
to
to be
serve.
the
It's a
representative.
It's a reappointment,
It's
correct?
a reappointment.
Please come,
Can you come up
please
to-
come to the
yeah.
podium and,
So yeah, with the regional commission, each of our counties are split up into sections. So specifically, what Frank represents is the southwest quadrant and the municipalities, I think, are listed on your handout. So when the terms are up for the different representatives on the commission, it's the county commissioners that make the formal designation, but we ask the participating municipalities to make nominations. So there's actually two names on that sheet. The one is Frank's, because and formerly he's the Southwest. So we're asking, Frank is interested in continuing, so that's in there. So you can nominate Frank, or if you have another name that you wish to nominate, we're willing to entertain it. What we're doing is collating all the nominations, presenting them to the commissioners at the end of the year so they can make the formal nominations. The other name that's on your list is Fred Leidy. Right. Fred is unlike many of them in that he is the Dauphin County representative at large. But I would suggest while it's not completely necessary, it would be worthwhile for you to nominate the at-large representative and Frank. And I can just tell you they've both been excellent representatives. Frank is a professional planner by training, so he's very well versed in a range of issues. And Fred, although don't tell him I said this, has been really great. He's been one of the driving forces behind this whole stormwater issue.
Yes.
It's certainly not a secret because you're being televised.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping he's not watching.
He'll get a boost. He's got really low esteem. I think this will help give him some confidence if he hears you talking about him. So
He texted, he said he's watching.
There you go.
we've got two good people, and so this is just in case we had other people who wanted
This
to
is in
nominate.
case you can. We'd ask you to, and the sheet that you have asks you
Go
to
ahead.
send an email to the generic thing that we have with whatever nominations you wish to offer. So you can have the opportunity to just nominate those two to continue on, or if you have other names, you can add them to the list.
Glad competent people want to serve. And
There you go.
No.
It sounds to me like you might want to make a motion on.
I just have one question, Chairman. The other townships and the boroughs, have they nominated them also?
I continually get these planning. The email comes to me, so I can't remember off the top of my head in terms of this section of the county what nominations I've received so far. But this process is ongoing. I get them on a regular basis from the various areas of the county.
So how do we guarantee that they'll be appointed?
Well, you'll know in January. What we do is we just collate the responses and we provide all the names that we've received for the commissioners. They will then act
Then they'll pick,
at
okay.
one of their early 2020 meetings.
Because if
to
they're
make
doing a
the
good
form.
job, we want them to represent us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Do you need a motion or just let you know email?
The email's fine. I believe if that's what you want to do.
Whatever.
Have we, in the past, have we done a motion, or have we just made a recommendation, Steve? Do you recall?
I can't remember. I can't either.
Gary, you?
No, my thought was that we
Yeah.
made a recommend, that
It
we
might
did have a
be
motion.
cleanest to do a
I
motion.
think you should do a motion.
Because it memorializes it in the
yeah.
minutes
Yeah,
that
it
we
might be.
made that.
Yeah,
Might be cleanest.
I think a motion would be, it can't hurt.
No, and
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the approval of the two names listed for both the representative and the at-large representative.
And those two names would be?
I'll let you pronounce that second name.
As stated in the
I
record.
just wanted to see if he
That's
could.
that's why I voiced my comments the way I
The
did.
two incumbents.
Klebnikov, right.
Two
There you go, that's right.
incumbents. So moved by Mr.
Let me
Crispin.
count.
Is there a second? Nice try.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Judd. Any additional questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. There we go.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
And now, we do have a couple of items under improvement guarantees, all two of which appear to be fairly routine.
Brad, I just have a question on the first one. It's both a reduction and an extension. And again, it did not look like there was anything exceptional. The second one was easy, that was a reduction, but the first one with the reduction and an extension, I'm assuming everything's just copacetic.
It is, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the two improvement guarantees as recommended and it's presented and recommended.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And with that, are there any additional announcements or comments from members of the board?
I just want to remind the residents on Saturday from 10 to 2, Colonial Park Fire Company will be having their annual open house.
Ah, good.
And we also,
Don't we have some readings coming
I was
up?
going to say, we have readings, spooky stories at Brightville on Saturday evening.
6:30.
And he left on, I think it's at 6:30.
6:30.
Okay.
I think you have to pay to go, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think it's a $5 fee.
It's through the Community Foundation, the Lower Paxton
And
Township
Joe left, and
Community
he would have
Foundation.
had all the information for us.
And don't you usually mention we attended the PSATs?
Oh, okay. Well, that wasn't PSATs. Dolphin County Supervisors Convention in Halifax, Mr. Judd, Mr. Henry, Mr. Zumas, and myself. And I was not at the Fall Festival, but.
And
Oh,
Mr. Gottschall.
Mr. Gottschall.
Yes.
I was not at the Fall Festival. I understand it was awesome. I was
was.
out of town, so the guys that were there, if you want to say
It
something.
was great. It was great. And
Well attended.
And you were out of town, I was out of country.
we'll let that one go.
Well, she said she was out of town. I thought I'd top her by saying I was out of the country.
But thank you to Terry and Barb and all the volunteers that were there. Absolutely awesome.
Yep, fire, police, EMS, we're all in attendance.
Now, my question is, did you guys do the hayride?
No,
The
the line
lines
was
were too long.
too long. Too long.
We are always looking for ways to accommodate the crowds and make it a pleasant experience for everyone, no matter how many folks are there.
We felt the children would get priority.
I did have a
Children of all ages.
vegan whoopie pie.
Oh, that's different.
It was interesting, yes. Sort of like eating a brownie.
It was well done, right?
It was actually good. But anything else? Okay, with that, our next meeting, we'll have a business meeting on Tuesday of next week. That's October 15th at 7 p.m. right here in this room. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.